Morning to all of you. I'm the guest preacher here today. It's good to see all of you. I want to tell you a story about Old Joe. Old Joe was a farmer, and he'd been living on his farm for a long, long time. All of his children were grown up, and they had all moved away, and his wife had died, so he lived on his farm all by himself. Now, Old Joe had a neighbor who lived right next door, who was also a farmer. And wouldn't you know, the neighbor and Old Joe had been friends since school. And the neighbor, his kids had grown up and moved away, and his wife had also died, so Old Joe and the neighbor were, well, they were alone together. Well, one day, Old Joe's neighbor came over into the yard and he said, "Old Joe, I think that's my calf you have there." "Oh no," said Old Joe, "that's my calf." "Oh no, Old Joe," said the neighbor, "it's my calf." And the two of them started to argue and argue and argue until they stopped. And then they split up. And the neighbor went to his house, and Old Joe stormed into his. And after that day, it was like this cloud came over Old Joe's life. Well, one morning, Old Joe was in the kitchen having breakfast. And there was a knock on the door. And there at the door was a young man with a toolbox on his shoulder. And he said that he was looking for work. And did Old Joe have anything that he might do around the farm? Well, Old Joe had the same response that you did, although he had to think about it first. He invited the young man in, and so they sat down to breakfast. And they had cereal, and ham and eggs, and toast, and a whole host of other things. And finally, Old Joe said to the young man, "You know, there is something you can do for me." And he took the young man and they looked out the picture window. And there between Old Joe's property and the neighbor's property was this big, big, big ditch. And Old Joe said, "My neighbor and I had an argument one day, and that old cuss took his tractor and then he dug this deep, deep ditch between our properties, and now it's all filled with water. I'm so fed up, I would like you, if you're willing, to build me a fence so I don't ever have to look at the ditch or my neighbor's farm ever again." "Well," said the young man, "I've got the tools. Do you have the lumber?" "Oh yes," said Old Joe. And Old Joe showed the young man the lumber that he needed. And then Old Joe said he had a number of errands that he had to run. And off he went. Now, Old Joe's errands took him much longer than he had ever imagined. And when he got back, it was almost supper time. And when he arrived, he was quite surprised because instead of a fence, there was a bridge going across the ditch in the water. There was his neighbor coming across the bridge. "Why, Old Joe, what a great idea to build a bridge. And by the way, that was your calf." And so the two friends, the two old men, became friends again. And then Old Joe looked up and there was the young man walking off in the distance. "Hey!" shouted Old Joe. "Where are you going? I think I've got other things you can do around here." And the young man called back, "Thanks, but I've got to go to other places. There are other bridges that I need to build." And that's my story. Thank you all for coming.